Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Okay, Alex, we are starting to see your screen. There it is. And we welcome you with a big round of applause from our souls. You may not hear it, but you could feel it. Thank you very much for joining us today, and please share the beauties you have to share with us.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here in North America. And as usual, we have a very strong representation from around the world. And this is what makes this meeting so successful. So I welcome everybody here, and I congratulate you on all the benefits of all the work that you've been able to do, because we're all starting to see that. So these are part of the teachings of the KAKT Foundation, as put forward by Maran Tavakoli Kesh. And this is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We are embarking on an intermediate Earth space journey now, and today's topic is the Magmasphere. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is October the 30th. No, that'll be next week, October 23rd, 2022. And this is the KAKT Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So we had to jump around a little bit. We started with basic Earth space, and we went into basic inner space, and last week we finished basic outer space. And it was kind of important to take that detour and to get back to our understanding in the intermediate level, just to review some of the topics on the basic Earth space. We talked about the currency of the Earth, ecosystems, a gateway to wherever, and a launch point from our Earth space, and a landing point to some other space, and wherever that space is, some nebulous point somewhere in the nebulous universe. And so we've been looking for our journeys into outer space, and we've made some revelations, and now we've got to review our Earth space on an intermediate basis, because things have changed. I would say our viewpoint has changed, our understanding has changed, and technology has changed. And so we have to change right along with it. So one of the things that we did not understand very much was the Magmasphere. And the Magmasphere is, of course, different from the biosphere. We entertain ourselves on the biosphere level of the Earth space, but underneath is the Magmasphere. And that's what we want to talk about today, because we're still searching for our way through outer space and searching for our little piece of the pie in the sky. And so by going back to Earth space and understanding how we progressed through the universe, we find it's still that little red dot at the bottom right hand corner, what we call man's universe. And we see that all that we know and all that we reference on a regular basis revolves around that little tiny red dot in the sky. That's our little piece of the pie, isn't it? But we have so many questions. And so we look at the first three books of Mr. Keshe and we see the universal order of creation of matters. And we say, okay, well, that's the source. But is that the source or is that the destination? Because when you look at book number 3, the origin of the universe, you find it has a relationship to the souls. So not knowing which way we're going, we do know that there's a connection. And so in book number 2, the structure of the light, that is the link. And as we've discovered with the structure of the light, that the light travels at different speeds. And so this has an effect on our overall viewpoint, because there's something non-tangible about our search. Whatever we're searching for seems to be some kind of phantom in the sky. And really it's that phantom pie, isn't it? And so we find that we are satellites of that pie in the sky, and what we're referring to right now is our Earth space. But satellites, as they circle and orbit around that space, eventually also become spaceships. And we'd like to see how we can progress into that level. And so we discovered the dream satellites, and we discovered that there are other dimensions. And we discovered that these dimensions are actually the reality dimensions, because these dimensions happen to be wherever you are. And right now we are in our Earth space. And so the reality dimension of Earth space is right here. And the problem for us has been that we've been looking for a place to go in outer space. And outer space is not a place. Outer space is a method of energy transfer. So that's how the universe works. It's energy in motion. And so not only is Earth space part of the energy in motion, but obviously we are part of the energy in motion. And we can see that we're more in motion than the Earth is in motion, except for the fact that the Earth rotates around the sun. And how does it do that? And how does it stay on track? And then we find that it also maintains a position. And because of this position, it has to have a reference, a relationship. And that relationship is to its neighbor. And so to understand who the neighbor is, we have to create boundaries. And so we find that the Earth is not Venus, is not Mars. So it's something in between. And so that's our sentimental pie in the sky, isn't it? But the thing is, not only is it rotating around the sun, but it is also rotating around its axis. And we're going to talk about that later on. But the thing is that we come here every day. And when I say we, the collective soul of the humanity on this planet. So it's somebody's birthday somewhere every day. So we come every day. And the thing is that the Earth is not stationary in its position with respect to the sun. There are seasonal changes. And so we see the seasons change not only with respect to the position of the sun, but we also see the seasonal changes with respect to the individual places on Earth. So, for instance, if we have winter in the northern hemisphere, we'll have some summer in the southern hemisphere. But they don't affect our target shooting, because when we come here, regardless of the season, we make it here. And so how do we do that? And how are we connected to, and what is it that we're connected to? So these are all nebulous relationships that we have, and it's hard to understand them when the only relationship we see is with that of Earth space. And so that becomes our confirmation point in everything that we think about in terms of science. We look at the convergence of the transmission and transition of energies. And once they come to this point of existence, which we call transmutation, we find, in fact, if it's a balanced maggraph, that not only is it invisible, but it is transparent. So what is the difference? The difference in the invisibility is that it is possibly non-tangible. But if it's tangible, it is not visible, but it is transparent. And so this transmutation business is at this point of crossing over. And so we're crossing over this vanishing point, which is the distance between the launch point and the landing point, the part that we call outer space. And we are occupying this reality dimension, and it's always some space. It has to be some space as opposed to no space. And so today we're still talking about Earth space because that's our space. That's our physical reality. But we have to understand that that physical reality is a product of the plasmatic reality. And so understanding this is what puts limitations on our soul. If we can understand this better, then we take those limitations off. And so our viewpoint isn't just from the physical reality, but from the plasmatic reality as well. And this is what constitutes the reality dimension. But, most important for us is our viewpoint with respect to man space, isn't it? Because the whole purpose of the dialogue is with respect to our space, the man space. But our man space has to take into account the environment space. Because if we're going to be man space, we have to be man space someplace. And so when we look at the structure of man space, and we find that we have different plasma states, dynamic plasma states, we have GAN states, and we have environmental states, physical states. And we can transition between all of these states. And at some point, we disappear, and at some point we appear. But the reference has to be to some place. So that some place, ironically, has the same set of energy states that we do, because our space and some space overlaps. Our space, in order to exist, has to be in some space. And so today we're talking about Earth space. And so when someone asks you, well, can you define plasma? Plasma is a kind of energy state. And there are different energy states. And we've reviewed all of the different energy states. And our point of view is dependent on our environment. So what we have to do really is to understand Earth space in this context. And so before we wanted to really find this Earth space, we had to find our inner space. because that was the key to the gateway to outer space. And this whole business is very, very important. And for a lot of us, we go through life and we never answer this question, and that's a tragedy. Because this is so important. We have to understand if important is non-important, then really nothing is important, because this is the essence of life. This is the essence of what we're doing. And to understand this, we have to understand the various rules of the plasma. And they're fairly simple. We understand that these different plasma states increase or decrease by at least an order of magnitude. And the higher energy states feeds the lower energy states. And so in that regard, if we increase the energy state, we call that natural decay, natural creation. And if we lower the energy state, we call that natural decay. But what's interesting is that in order to have one, you have to have the other. It is a two-way street. But that street can also be catalytic insofar as it being non-consuming. And so the only thing that we can relate to at this point in time is the sun. That is catalytic, comes up every day, gives us energy unconditionally. And the next day it comes up again, gives us energy unconditionally. And so we find that in this state, this is a higher energy state. And so the giving and taking of energy at these higher energy states are also higher by many orders of magnitude. And so this is the benefit of understanding plasma. In fact, plasma has three very important characteristics, of which we are preoccupied with two of them. And one is that plasma absorbs fields, and then plasma is a barrier of fields. And so because of this boundary creation, we have to have a boundary of a field to be able to absorb into that field. But we don't absorb everything. We discriminate. And so the boundary of that field likewise has to be a barrier of that field. So the rules of the game with respect to absorbing energy or being a barrier to energy actually follow an overriding rule, an uber rule. And that is that the plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. And so this becomes the ultimate lesson that we have to understand, because as plasma scientists, we have a responsibility. And to understand that there's a magnetical gravitational balance, which we call a maggrav, and that is in our physical existence. But in our spiritual existence, we also have a spiritual responsibility. And it works exactly the same way, only on a different energy level. And so we find that the spirit is the motor of the soul. And so here we are back to the motion. There's a lot of motion that we have as man space. But relative to our earth space, it doesn't seem like we're moving at all. And that's kind of a good thing, because the way the earth is moving, if we were to feel it move, I think we would all get very dizzy. So what we need to understand is how this plasma science is adding to our knowledge, and how we add to the knowledge of the plasma science. As I said, it's a two-way street. And as we become more receptive to and acknowledge the difference between the awake state and the dream state, and the combination and relationship of the two states, this affects the rate of change. And so the rate of change is now really going to change, because we are extending these field relationships. It's not just a adversarial versus a coexistence type of relationship. There's an awakening that we have with respect to our relationship with Earth space. And as part of that awakening, we find that Earth space is a lot more than we gave it credit. And in our process of understanding, we've discovered our dream state, which we experience every night. And that is part of our inner space. So if our man space with relationship to Earth space, then our inner space also has a relationship to the inner Earth space. And so this is where the science meets the soul of man for peace, because the soul of man governs man space, but the soul of Earth governs Earth space. Excuse me. So as we review Earth's target ranges, we find that we have pretty well covered all the ranges that go from the core to the magnetosphere. But there's an area beyond the magnetosphere, and we know that that is also part of Earth space, because the moon space is a satellite that rotates around the Earth space. And so there's a direct correlation between the moon space and the Earth space. But in that area beyond that magnetosphere, we say, well, there is an effect, but there's no atmosphere. So there's a lacking of atmosphere beyond the magnetosphere. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lacking of a connection. And so our occupation is primarily on the biosphere range. And that biosphere range includes the land, which is made up of SiO2, silicon dioxide. But part of our biosphere includes the water. And this is a very unique characteristic, because that's made of H2O. And we haven't said whether this SiO2 or H2O is plasmatic or physical. But I think we all understand right now that there are two plasma states available to this. And so we understand that our biosphere range is a byproduct. The atmosphere is a byproduct. The magnetosphere is a byproduct. Beyond the magnetosphere is a byproduct. And so all of this is part of Earth space, and there is a relationship insofar as the orbit of the moon is on the magnetical boundary. And then if we go within the biosphere range, we go into the gravitational space, because the range and the identification of the range is all based on density. And so we get into the magmasphere, and we find that it has different characteristics. Now, the question becomes, is the magmasphere the Earth brain? Does it not stand to reason that the Earth would have a brain? It has to have some kind of cognitive capability. It's a dynamic plasma field, and we don't see the guiding hand, but we have to recognize that the Earth has a guiding hand, and that would be its own guiding hand within its environment. And so we know its environment is somewhere within the solar system. So to understand this environment a little bit better, if we look at the fundamental principle of the twinity, we see that there is an electron and a proton, and these are two plasma fields. And there's a relationship between the two. So the plasma of the proton field is larger than the plasma of the electron field. But the two work together in combination as an atom. And so we could say, by extension, that the magmasphere is like the proton and the moon is like the electron. We could say that. But this energy that is transferred is also, we know, magnetical, because that is part of the rays. The rays are basically electrons in motion, but in outer space. And so to go from one point to another point, we find that the structure of the launch point and the structure of the landing point are the same, except that when we have a magnetical structure, it is in its singularity. It is part of the transmutation, part of the transportation, transmission, or transition, and these are all the same thing, because what they are is energy in motion. And then for that energy in motion to go from somewhere or go to somewhere, it has to go from a gravitational dimension to another gravitational dimension. Well, if you're going from a gravitational dimension to another gravitational dimension, then those dimensions cannot be the same. And so when we look at the Keshe model of the nuclear decay of the neutron, we see that singular dimension, which is the fundamental plasma. And through the decay process, what we call a decay process, but it's also part of the creation process, is the release of these PM ticks, these rays, and the subsequent creation of the electron-proton marriage, which we call an atom. And so this becomes the launch dimension. And in order to have a launch dimension, you have to have a launch field. And then if you're having a launch field, you have to have a landing field. And so you have this transition energy, the PM ticks, which are at some point. And so that point needs to have a reference point. And it's the same thing. There's a creation of the rays, there's an emission of the rays, there's an absorption of the rays. And this is all done at light speed. And as always, we don't specify which speed of light, because what we talk about is the bonding dimension. That's the reality dimension. That's where you are right now. You are in the reality dimension. And that reality dimension is part of your physicality spectrum, which is a byproduct of the plasmatic spectrum. And this bond between the two is unseen. It's transparent. It's invisible. It's a Magmasphere condition. And that's what constitutes that bonding dimension. So from that, we have a capability of feeding, and we feed this in energy packs. And because these energy packs have this diversity, and when they come together, they transcend all of these different reality dimensions, and they bring this diversity. And that diversity is diluted into a composite plasma charge. And so that charge has to come within some kind of dimension. some kind of atmosphere. And so we look at the Earth space and we see the gradient charge of the atmosphere as we come from the magnetical range of the moon to the gravitational range of the magmasphere. We see an increase in density, and that increase in density is the gradient charge that is attracting the aminogen. And this aminogen contains the spice of life, which allows approximately 8 billion souls on this planet, in terms of humanity, to coexist despite the individuality. But the arrival here has to do with the Earth space. And so that was our dream. The Earth space has a dream as well. And so we find that the sharing of these dreams is the default position of all the soul packs. The soul packs of all the humanity that have gravitated to this Earth space, and the soul pack that have created the Earth space and that maintain the Earth space. And this is all based on the basic plasma feeding rule, where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so fundamentally and basically, very basically, the plasma fields interact through attraction and repulsion. And that is part of the magnetical operation of the plasma fields. But the magnetical operation of the plasma fields are both gravitational and magnetical at the same time. They have to be, because there's a connection. And it is that connection which allows the feeding. You have to know when to stop feeding. So there has to be a feedback. And this is an ongoing thing, regardless of the dimension. It's all part of the way the universe is created. The universe exists from energy, and energy is always in motion. But the key point is that when we look at the universal order of creation of matters, and we see the convergence of the matters into one point, they come from somewhere, they come to a point, and they have to go somewhere else. So automatically, all things are in combination. So just because we can't see the other half of the equation doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because we've proven that concept over and over and over again. And so what it all boils down to is really, with the creation of the principal matter, which is the combination of the PM ticks coming together and converging with the principal matter, the transition matter, and the convergence matter. This becomes part of the plasmagen convergence. And to say, well, it's part of the plasmagen because we don't know if it's a physical or a plasmatic plasma. It doesn't matter. What matters is that when these fields converge together, they become a magrav, which is in a balanced condition. And at that point, there has to be a relationship with another field, that feedback field, right? So that feedback field then also has a field interaction. And it is that field interaction which we call inertia. And so from our man space plasmagen, our feedback field is our Earth space. And so we see that there's a sequence. And this sequencing is very, very important, because if there wasn't a sequence, this world would be in such a mess. Oh, pardon me, this world is in such a mess. Well, I think it doesn't have to do with the fact that these sequences don't work, it has to do with the fact that man has made bad choices. And as the last man standing, we always have to make choices and understand that this feeding system that we have, we can turn it on and we can turn it off. And then we can change the strength of this system by increasing or decreasing. And as a result, we alter our positioning. And that positioning can be done through enhancement or the diminishment. So things are not just given. It's not just a prophecy. Prophecy assumes no change in the feeding, no change in the strength, and no change in the positioning. Well, surprise. When we introduced the cups of life, we demonstrated to the world that this nebulous point in the universe can be brought to a specific point in our Earth space. And as part of this Earth space, we created some ganses which originated from an inner space. And within that inner space, there's a core space. And so our dimension, which we recognize as our biosphere dimension as part of this Earth space, has different kinds of feedback. And interestingly enough, we have a physical bottle. It's made of glass, and yet it's transparent. And we see inside, we see the Gans, and that Gans is physical, but it has a different energy strength, an energy field strength. And inside the Gans, well, there's a hole in the Gans, and it too is transparent. And has it disappeared? No, the hole is there. I see it. I'm sure you can see it because I can see from one side of the Gans to the other side of the Gans. But what I don't see the guiding hand that created that hole in the center. It came from somewhere. So, if that something is at that core, then the core of what you're looking at is a representation of the soul in the core. Just like we have a soul. And so understanding these principles, we created the cups of life. And we didn't just create a Gans, we created many different Ganses. CO2 Gans, calcium Gans, copper Gans, zinc Gans, water Gans, amino acid Gans. These are all Ganses. And they come together as a byproduct of a feeding and a feedback system. But feeding to what? Feeding to another field that is an interacting field. An interaction with what? Our Earth space. So our Earth space has a magnetical gravitational field, and the interaction of the Earth space with us has a magnetical gravitational field. And when we put all the 5 cups together, we find that they all individually have a magnetical gravitational field and a soul. But collectively, the 5 cups together have a magnetical gravitational field and a soul. So which soul? Which soul is which? And how could you tell the difference? So what we find is that the cup of man involves the cup of the soul, the cup of emotion, and the cup of physicality. And so each cup has a soul, but collectively the 3 cups have our soul. And it's a representative of our soul. So that soul within the cup of soul is interacting with our soul. So now it's another soul. And because we're on Earth space, we depend on the Earth space to feed us the energy that we need to operate in the state of physicality, because the state of physicality is the lowest energy state. And unfortunately, in the process of coming into the lowest energy state up until now, there has been a deficiency in the feeding cycle. And it's not that we can't maintain it. It's that we have introduced other rules, other man-made rules, which don't comply with the universal rules of feeding. We have created binding energy paths. And that's perfectly normal, isn't it? Because when we look at the binding energy of the Earth space, we find that energy is absorbed. It's attracted and gravitationally, and as it comes in and more comes in, this is how you create a maggrav. There is this binding energy path. But in order to exist as a binding energy path, it's a two-way street. There has to be an elevating energy path where the energy is emitted, it is repelled magnetically, and it goes out, and more goes out. And so the more that goes out, the more that comes in. And so this comes through a sequence and a selection process, and it's all done collectively. And it's done without your physical involvement. The physical being, insofar as the only energy that is recognized is the physical transfer of energy. There is a plasmatic transfer of energy that is nonstop, ongoing all the time. And this is part of the Maggrav feeding dimension. So this is why if you set up the Maggrav, which is a balanced condition, then the feeding is automatic. Energy comes in, energy goes out. More energy comes in, more energy goes out. It's a two-way street. And then you have the balanced condition, and this becomes an automatic feeding situation. So this is not just from the man space point of view, but it's from the Earth space point of view as well. And so we see the similarity. We see the dynamic plasma boundary that is created by the Earth space field. But within that Earth space field, there's an Earth space point. And from that point, it radiates out. That becomes the feeding radiance. And then from the outer radiance, there's a feedback radiance. And that comes in and contributes to the inner space spectrum. So we find a dynamic similarity between the plasmatic manifestation of the Earth space and the physical manifestation of the Earth space, and likewise of the man space. But there is a classic difference. There's a difference with respect to that motion. We are free to move on the Earth space. And fortunately for us, it's a stable field. But we have the added capability is that we can go through different plasma dimensions. And as such, we have to recognize that we have different dynamic plasma interactions. So to pick the dimension, you have to pick the interaction. But how do you do that? And so the transfer of this energy, this feeding radiance and this feedback radiance, and the target that you're targeting becomes part of your reality dimension. And the limits on your reality dimension are based on your skill. And likewise, based on whether or not you're physical dominant or plasmatic dominant. And so as we explore our dynamic plasma dimensions, we find that not only can we effect the transfer of energy, but we can be part of that transfer of energy. And so wherever we are, that is our reality dimension, isn't it? And we can go from one dimension to another dimension, but understanding that each dimension has a structure of 3 dimensions, because first of all, when 2 come together, they create an enhancement and they create a 3rd field. And so the universal harvesting is this enhancement. And man has decided in too many ways to pervert that enhancement into self-consumption. And so why should I create the energy when I can steal the energy? This becomes part of the loose harvesting exercise. And the failure of man is to understand that the loose harvesting is part of the self-consumption, and self-consumption includes you. Doesn't make sense. The universal harvesting is self-enhancement. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. In fact, it doesn't help you at all, because when you look at the magmasphere of the Earth, we find that it's fluid-like, it's hot, it's more dense, so it's gravitational. It's in the sub-biosphere range. We don't live in the magmasphere. We live on the crust around the magmasphere, or the fluid, which we call water. But inside the magmasphere, it's not differentiated. On the crust, it's differentiated. We have North America, we have Europe, we have Africa. This is all differentiated, but inside the magmasphere, it's not differentiated. And then we know with the rotating field in the center, there's a vanishing point at the core, just like the hole in the gas. And of course, the soul of the earth is in this core. There has to be a soul of the earth. And so we find this magmasphere positioning as part of the various overlapping fields. So if we're looking at it from the sun's perspective and we're looking out to the Mars, we find that we go through, if our destination is Mars space, well, that's overlapped by Earth space and man space and vertical people space and horizontal space. And then there's that satellite we call the moon space, and other satellites and their space. And then there are some satellites become spaceships. And so all of these are overlapping fields. And as a field, we know that these fields are magravs. So they're in balanced positions, but not 100% balanced, because they're visible, which means they're physical. So what we're seeing is the representation of the lowest energy level, and what we're not seeing is the creation of the byproduct. So when we look at our universe, we come to the point where we see that to identify the universe, we put in a boundary. And so when we come to the edge of that boundary, in order to maintain that boundary, we have to follow the gravitational path, the orbiting path. Well, what causes that change in direction? that change in direction has to have some kind of magnetical gravitational cause and effect. And if there is a magnetical and gravitational cause and effect, then we see there's an inside within the boundary, and there's an outside of the boundary. Well, how can there be an outside when we've just identified the limit of the universe? If the limit of the universe is limited, then beyond that limitation, there has to be some kind of effect. And that effect, then the question becomes, which effect? Because we know that there are various energy levels. And so these energy levels are extending beyond the limitation. Well, what do we call that? This is part of our field radiance. So the universe also has a field radiance. And we don't know enough to ask the question, and we don't know enough to answer the question, except we're on the path to answering that question. Because what we do know is that in order to have a magnetical field, you have to have a gravitational field, because it's a two-way street. But in the process of converting from magnetical to gravitational, there has to be an exchange of energy. So there has to be an absorption process and an emission process, both at the same time. And so at that point, we have a transition point where the feeding radiance becomes a feedback radiance. And then the feedback radiance becomes more of the feeding radiance. And so how do we transition this boundary? I don't see any rockets. This is the essence of transmutation. The transmutation is the essence to understand the difference between the soul of the man and the soul of the body. The soul of the man, that's the essential you. And the soul of the body, well, that's the surrogate you. It's still you, but it's a representative of you, because it's you interacting with the environment, whatever that environment is. And today we're talking about the environment being Earth space. But the soul of the man being the essential you, you're interacting not only with the Earth space, but with other plasmagen states. And so this is where it becomes very important to identify manifestation and see that it's can be non-tangible or tangible, and non-visible or visible. But the most important thing is it can be plasmatic or physical. But the reality is that it has to be plasmatic. It may be physical. The manifestation could simply be emotional. And so even the emotion of presence becomes a form artifact of this energy in motion at this manifestation point. So the energy in motion may be the intermediate point between the plasmatic reality and the physical reality. And so this may be the target field and what may that target field be, and who decides? Well, that decision, first of all, is made at the launch point, isn't it? Out of the launch field. And then where you're going is the target field, and who makes that decision. And so we find that the matter state, which is physical, is what too many of us depend on. And what we have to understand is that there's a feeding and a feedback plasma dimension, which we call the plasmatic mattergen state. And so this involves a change in our viewpoint, it involves a change in our understanding, and it involves a change in how we approach our environment. Because we see that our physicality is the dominant matter state. And as it being the dominant matter state, it implies that we need to be the dominant matter. Well, that's not true. We are the dominant matter of our man space. And what we are sharing is an overlapping space of our earth space. And our matter space is derived from our plasmatic dimension. Therefore, the earth space is derived from its plasmatic dimension. And so there's a difference in how this motion is created. And we are the benefactors of this motion. So our existence is literally a combination of natural creation and natural decay within an environment that is a natural decay and a natural creation combination. And there is a bond between those two which we cannot see. And that bond is something that we tend to overlook, discount, fudge it, but the fact of the matter is that is the reality dimension. So it's our relationship with our earth space, and that creates a different field interaction, which we call inertia. So if we review man space and we find that we have two souls, and each soul has an emotion, so we have two emotions. And so we have a residence for these two souls, so we have the two physicalities. And so we have an inner space within an inner space. But how does that apply to the field of inertia? Well, the field of inertia is an interaction of the field of man space and earth space. So now we come to the point that the earth space has to have two physicalities. So the physicality that we are totally understanding of is the biosphere, because we experience it every day. And we take it for granted. And in fact, we take it so much for granted that it actually migrates to abuse. And that's where the problem is. Because we forget that there's a magmasphere. And within this magmasphere is the other physicality. And so if we abuse the biosphere, it's as if we abuse our body. And if we abuse or discount the magmasphere, it's as if we discount our brains. Oh, well, we do discount our brains. We say we only have, 15% access of our brain. Well, every athlete knows that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so maybe that's why so many of us mentally experience atrophy. of the mental muscle, which we call the brain. Well, hello. The characteristics of that physicality transcend the limitations of physical science and spirituals. And so we find that our existence with respect to our soul, our emotion, and our physicality has a direct relationship to the earth space. And we are just satellites on this earth space right now. And so this earth space also has a boundary that is part of the moon space, and it has a magmasphere that is a sub-product of the biosphere. And you take those two fields and interact them, and you have the field of inertia, which is representative of the interaction of those two fields. And the interaction of those two fields is the life that we see. So the product of the life that we see comes from the inner space of the product of who we are as man space and the product who earth space is. And we've seen that when we see with the double rainbows, we find that there's a zone. There's a zone in between in our physicality. And we can see right through it. It's totally transparent, but clearly it's there. And so this is the satellite pathway of the peace stone. And the peace stone is not in the magmasphere. It's not in the biosphere. And it's not beyond the magnetosphere. It's right there in the atmosphere. So when we look at the soul sequencing and we said, okay, well, let's look at man space's soul sequencing, the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth is what attracted the soul of the man. The soul of the man is the byproduct of the reaction between the two souls, the soul of the sun and the soul of the earth. And so that was a convergence of the energy. So now that we have the soul of the man, we take that and interact it with the soul of the earth. That attracts the soul of the body. Now that you have the soul of the body, that interacts with the soul of the earth and manifests itself as physicality of the body. So in order to manifest as the physicality of the body, it has to manifest into a physicality of an environment. And that environment is the earth space. So when we're looking at the dimensions, and we have 1 and 1 is more than 2, where we have 2 feeding dimensions, but you still have those 2 feeding dimensions. Now you've added a third feedback dimension, right? That's the byproduct of the first 2 dimensions. And as an observer, we find that we're none of those 3 dimensions. We're in another dimension entirely. And that is our man space dimension. Well, that relationship applies to earth space as well. So let's take that same sequence and see what is the difference. And so we look at and say, well, the difference is that there's a near space and there's a far space, but we're nowhere near that far space because the only thing that we see with respect to the far space is what has manifested itself physically. And our experience is limited to what we see in our dreamscape. But everything within our solar system, we find that we have the sun space, the planet space, the moon space, and those spaces in between That's all part of our near space. And that's really, what most of us care about. It's our relationship with the soul of the earth. And now we find that the soul of the earth has to have a place. So the soul of the earth has its own space, and it is in the core of the Magmasphere. So if the soul of the man is in the core of the brain, then the soul of the earth is in the core of the Magmasphere. And we also know that there's a soul of the sun. It only stands to reason. And all of these are part of the inner space, but the inner space is really a manifestation of the relationship between the various souls and the souls of the bodies. So our relationship, our soul of the body, interacts with the soul of the earth body. And so our physicality then becomes a representative on the physicality of the earth body. So our physicality of the body in this case is determined by the physicality of the earth space. And our positioning there is as a result of our inner space, the souls, and the earth's inner space, the souls. So let's look at this soul sequencing again, but let's look at it from the point of earth space. So we recognize that there's a soul of the sun. Well, what else is there? So the soul of the sun is part of the solar system. The solar system, therefore, by extension, must have a soul. And so if we take the soul of the solar system and interact with the soul of the sun, that attracts the soul of the earth. And so once we have the soul of the earth, that can interact with the soul of the sun. And that creates a soul of the earth body. And so when we have the soul of the earth body, that can now interact with the soul of the sun and manifest the physicality of the earth. The earth in its physicality, which is part of the sun space, right? And so whatever space it is, it has a physical limitation. And with the plasma science, we can transcend that physical limitation by going beyond that limitation, which we call nuclear science. Because when you look at the energy and how it's transferred to the universe, it involves ethics, morality, compassion, and courage. These are characteristics of the soul. Didn't say which soul. Soul of the sun, soul of the man, soul of the earth, and the soul of the universe. It's all part of creation. And so there's a connection. And this connection is only capable at the speed of light because we have a physical space and we also have a non-tangible space. So in order to transfer energy through these spaces, because they go through different dimensions with different field strengths, they have to have a different speed. And so when we looked at the connection to the rest of the universe, we find that the soul of the body is faster than the earth light. And the soul of the earth body, therefore, is likewise faster than earth light. And then we find that the soul of the man is faster than the spirit light being the speed of the soul of the body. Well, then by extension, the soul of the earth is also faster than the spirit light of the earth body. And so this is why we're saying the transcendence to heaven is really to understand our earth space. We are in heaven. Wherever we are in heaven. That's why we are here. And we now know that there are different speeds, but the speed on Earth light and the speed on Mars light is the same. But to travel, you have to go faster than the Earth light and faster than the Mars light. So we understand then, when we were searching for outer space, what we were really looking at is the difference between manifestation and materialization. Materialization is a specific reality dimension of physicality, and the manifestation point can be any nebulous manifestation of reality. All we have to identify is the environment. And so this is where we're having trouble. We're in the pursuit of happiness. We're actually failing on the launch field because we have never launched a rocket into outer space. The rules for Earth space apply to inner space, and the rules for inner space are represented by the rules for outer space. And so as part of Earth space, we recognize that we have two souls. And so the peace stone is the soul of the earth body. It's representative of the earth body. And we are part of that biosphere. And that biosphere can only exist in the process of peace. And we've reached an existential crisis where we have to harvest the plasma energy of the plasma universe. And when we say the plasma universe, that includes the earth space. So when many of us choose through lying and deception to bind energy and steal the energy at the expense of others, we find that we shut the gates to the universe. And we know this because there's a proof. First proof is that you were born, and you weren't born with a rocket. And the second thing is you were born to a place. You weren't born to Mars, you were born to Earth. So there's a preference and sentimentality for the Earth space. The question really becomes, is the Earth space the midpoint to the round trip? Well, if you came as a baby and then you left as a baby, we could honestly say that the Earth point would be, the Earth space is the midpoint. But there's an interesting phenomenon. You come as a baby and now you're an adult. Something has changed. There's a change in the transmission of energy. So maybe this was the target point and now becomes a new round trip. It could be a one-way ticket to another target point. There is no prerequisite to come back. Except I personally believe that we've created such a mess that most of us understand we are inherently peaceful. And therefore we came here because the earth is inherently peaceful. And as such, we inherit the earth and we inherit heaven on Earth. This is where the science meets the soul of man for peace. This is a prerequisite. And as such, because of the advancements that we've made, we now see excitable visitors coming. Maybe this is a reverse of their dreamscape. And which reality dimension do they come from? Because they're coming into our reality dimension. And these are the dynamic findings in the post-June the 6th era, where we now have choices, where we can manifest in Earth space, manifest in inner space, and travel through outer space. And so this becomes part of the effort. And we are now at the point where we can facilitate the peace harvest between the plasma reality and the physical reality. And so we understand that there's a body enhancement to enhance man space, but there's also material enhancement to enhance the earth space. And what is unique here is that this is a man-made achievement. And what it's done is blending the plasma science with peace on Earth. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. Teachings on plasma science, calling all Earth space patriots. There's a World Peace Treaty. Sign it with your heart, sign it with your soul, and then sign it with a pen for all to see. Because the Earth has overlapping fields of life with freedom from boundaries. The reality dimensions are not affected by whether it's near space or far space, but the physical and emotional atmospheric transformation that the Earth has to go through is not only earthbound, but there are other fields that need the same transformation. And this transformation is the transmutation from that transparency point to the manifestation point, which is representative of the desire of the inner space of Earth space. And the Magmasphere is the inner space of Earth space. And it connects us to the nebulous point in the universal inner space of freedom. And so the soul of the Earth exposes the man-made fallacies of thought. That's why plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. Thank you all for listening. This is the end of this particular lesson. I hope you enjoyed the trip.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us all, Alex. I know you usually leave more questions than answers. And of course, this is all easier said than done, but maybe we're going to come to the point where it will be just as easy as speaking. I think we have to become plasma detectives in a way. Perhaps create some of these measuring systems to actually measure and test the plasma. I mean, we have to measure in the matter state, so wouldn't we also, even though Mr. Keshe said the creator doesn't measure?
See, this is an important analogy that you've just drawn here, and that is that the absence of evidence is evidence. You can't just say, well, I don't see the evidence. Well, that's the problem. That's what makes the detective a detective. Identify what's missing and then find it. And in order to find it, you have to look for the evidence of the creation of the evidence that's absent. So the evidence that's absent is the byproduct of the evidence that's present.
Yes, they often say you can't prove a negative, but if someone says there's an elephant in the room and you observe and you see no presence of elephants, couldn't you prove that there is no elephant in the room?
So the age of Socrates is over. Okay. It's all fun and games, and it's things, that people use to entertain themselves. But, the fun and games has gotten very serious to the point where it becomes an existential crisis. And so, kiddies have to leave their toys behind, and the game is changing. And so the game of life is also a game, much more serious game, but it's also a pleasurable game. And this is the part that's missing. When you look at your childhood and you say, well, if you've had the opportunity to look at the adults in your life, so whether you're a child of a parental relationship or you're the child that's an orphan, you have adults around you. And being a viewer, an observer, you create an opinion because you can see objectively whether or not you agree with the decisions that are made. And if you disagree vehemently, then you run, you flee, you jump ship. But, if you don't have the courage to do that and you put up with it, then you are faced with that kind of abuse. But the point being that as a child, you're able to observe these things, and it's just assumed. It's just assumed that when you become an adult, that you will not be party to this kind of abuse, or that your life will change for the better. Well, I think we can all agree that there are portions of our life that are definitely better. But, when we look at the peace and prosperity on this planet and pick a decade, any decade going back, even, before World War I, and tell me where we have improved. This has been the failure in the pursuit of happiness. So we're in the post-June the 6th era, and we need to recognize that the rules of the game have changed. And so we are now entertaining the rules of the universal community. And as such, we can take the benefits from what man has created and combine that with the benefits of what the universal community has created. And so you find that 1 and 1 is more than 2. And we are just starting to benefit from that.
Right. This whole understanding of interaction of fields, the collection, all the things he named, amalgamation of fields, division of fields, this all has to be understood. I don't think we have a full understanding. Maybe we can actually do it with our own reactors, with our souls, with our energies better than we can in the systems that we're creating, because we don't have that full knowledge of this collaboration of fields, combination of fields. We can't see them. We have to work in a different understanding. I know Mr. Kesh originally said to try to hold the ganses, to see what emotions it elicits in you in a way. And I guess the sensitivity is very important, but again, the collaboration of fields, we're not quite at that level, but we're going to be coming into that level to get to the next step, I think. I know he talked about these measuring devices and things that we need to develop these to sense the strength of the fields or so on and so forth. And many times we can do, I think our skin is or ourselves are our best plasma detector up to this point. You received many thank yous, Alex. Would someone like to ask a question? Let's see if we can open this up a little bit. We haven't yet seen much out of the material enhancement unit, but I'm sure it's ready to go. And another amazing, unbelievable, just as with the gas units where they're pulling the methane or gravitating methane right out of the air. So will happen with the copper or the silver or whatever you need. And again, we create the soul first and the physicality somehow follows it. So as he said earlier, we chose the man, we chose the soul of the man, the animals. But he also said we chose the soul of the elements on this planet. Alex, are you still with us? I think you stopped sharing the screen.
Yes, I am. I made a boo-boo.
Okay.
Oh,
Won't be the first or the last.
no.
No, and this is how we learn through making these mistakes, and a lot of mistakes we make in testing. So I've trying to go back a little bit into testing and playing and applying some of the knowledges the others have shared as well. Ed, is there anything you'd like to bring up, or perhaps I could bring it up? He was wondering about
Well, Mark, I actually I wrote to the person and I expressed my opinion, so I didn't think it was necessary to bring it up here.
Okay. I know you said, oh, go ahead.
Are you waiting for me, Mark?
No, you said you
Oh,
did.
okay.
No, it was just about the creation of a. Oh, we're getting feedback. That's okay. Something about the creation of a soul between the two people. Mr. Kesh had alluded to that in the workshop, that he said we found the perfect couple to test this with. We think we found the perfect couple. And how that all comes about.
So, Mark, that's a very interesting point again. If you have one soul field and then you have a second soul field, automatically there would be an inertia field between those two fields. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Yeah, so this is the problem with physicality, is we are deciding and determining which fields we're going to recognize with respect to these relationships. And that's just not how the world works. So if we can be more open to the way the universe works and allow this to happen, so in other words, don't tell the universe to shut up. Be open about it, accept what the universe is telling you, and interpret what it means. Because we have this capability excuse me, we have this capability of interpreting what this information is all about. And we have to understand that this information is given in such a manner that is clear and concise. And so our interpretation of this information has to be equally clear and concise. And this is a prime example when you go out and it's raining and one says, oh, what a beautiful day. And another says, ah, what a terrible day, it's raining. And so the day is the same. The interpretation of that event is different. So therefore, the individual has the power to determine the answer. And if we have a limiting factor that we always impose and we say, well, the criteria of a good day is the lack of rain. Well, that's not what constitutes a day. Some days have rain, some days have snow, some days have sun. And so I guess it all depends on what you want. And so I discovered this as if, you know, like I'm Christopher Columbus, right? I discovered this because as a city dweller, my world was artificial. So whatever time of day it was irrelevant to me because I was living in a cave. You know, we call them condominiums or apartments. And it's interesting, you know, that in our modern times, so many of us have gravitated to cave dwelling. But it wasn't until I got my exposure into the country life that I realized, you know, it makes really good sense to get up with the sun and to quit work with the sun. You become more productive and you become more receptive to what is going on. And as I personally became more receptive to that, I became a much better weatherman than the hippy-dippy weatherman on TV. In fact, I was way more accurate. And the thing is, when you look at the birds and you see that they migrate south for the winter, and so, you know, a lot of us, we want to migrate south to the winter as well. But we don't have the same, you know, requirements that the birds do. We can build shelters, we can exchange energy, we can alter our environment, and so I find that we have different areas. We have tropical, we have temperate, and we have the cold areas. And then we have the really, really cold areas. And so you find that from the equator to the North Pole, there are a lot of places where people live. And you say, well, why would you live there? You know, there's an enjoyment. And if you see that beauty and that enjoyment with respect to that environment, then you can understand. But if you put a restriction on it and say, well, you know what? I don't have the creature comforts. I have to provide the creature comforts. That's uncomfortable. Well, you know what? The universe is a benevolent place, and we are capable of traveling throughout that universe. And not every place that we travel to has that condition of creature comforts that we're used to on this planet. So what do? Do we insist on bringing our environment to that environment? Is that even possible? So we see that it is possible, but is that advisable? Is that in our best interest? Wouldn't it be just in our best interest to adapt to that environment? And so if adapting to that environment means you have to have, you know, 4 legs and 2 heads, I don't know. It's hard to imagine from our point of view here with respect to this environment. But if we go to another environment and we bring our environment there, well, isn't that what we're trying to do with our spacesuits? We go in our rocket ships and we go in our spacesuits and we go into a different environment, and that seems to be okay. That seems to be acceptable. You know, despite how funny it looks, it seems to be a desirable thing. Really? Do you want to spend the rest of your life walking around in a spacesuit? You already have a spacesuit. It's the skin on your body. And you already have a desirable environment. It's called the Earth space. And you already came here and you didn't need a rocket. And the thing is, what I find in our environment, there's a tremendous dislike for the fellow man. And the reason for it, and has been exacerbated by the pandemic, is the negative factor that other members of society put in on our tiny little perfect world. It's disruptive. And the reason it's disruptive is because of this binding of energy. So the existence within our space is shared with others who believe that they have an existential right to consume the energy in a binding fashion. And you say, well, that causes a deficiency to the community. Where is the benefit to the community? And that's a good question. And that's the question that all of us should ask, because we have to understand when our neighbor is sick, the community is sick. When our neighbor cannot pay their bills, then they cannot contribute to my prosperity either. My prosperity is interrelated to my neighbor's prosperity. And so as a Keshe Foundation, what we are offering is an opportunity for all of us to share in the prosperity. But in order to do that, we have to share by the rules of the universal community, and that is through peace. Peace and prosperity are like the electron-proton combination. It is a dynamic plasma field. And so now we have the technology to do this, and we are on the verge of changing things. So the real question then becomes is, how adaptable are we really? Because all of us talk a good game, right? But really, think about it. If our lifestyle changes as a result of the introduction of this plasma technology, how is our lifestyle going to change? What is going to happen to our values? And what is going to happen when you see the things that were so important in your life suddenly become irrelevant? I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that because peace and prosperity is a desirable thing. And we need to bring heaven on earth.
Okay, would someone else like to come in? And again, this creation of a soul without the usual physical interactions is very similar, it seems, to the material enhancement, where the soul is generated first and then the physicality follows it. So it would be the same, I guess, in the humans. We talked about the soul being embedded in the womb of the mother, so I would imagine it will take time to grow. But it's also been explained that this is how souls are created in the universe. I guess everyone contributes some fields in a certain location. Whatever you don't need, you can contribute to that. And then over time, or in a certain amount of time, the fields come together and create a soul. And then it's, I guess, up to the soul what sort of physicality it would like to take on. But they've been doing this immaculate conception for a long time in space, it sounds like.
Can I share my dream?
We all have a microphone, of course.
Last Thursday, I saw a dream after Mr. K's teaching. His teaching finished at our time is 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock sometimes. After that, I went to bed and I saw a dream. Most of my life, I saw very strange dream, 95% time, and maybe 5% is a regular dream. So that dream, I feel it is double strange dream. That's why I want to share the dream. After Mr. Kesh's teaching, I went to bed, and then I saw it is broad light daytime, and outside is very bright. Looking at the sky in the dream. So suddenly I saw in the sky there is 3 snakes, very big. It's bigger than python. Is in the like a cloud level. Which level the cloud is there? That level, bigger 3 snakes. And then suddenly those snakes fall in the earth. And then I walk few places, and again I saw in the sky. And then I saw 3 snakes, again, same position. Those are in the cloud level. So that time I understood those are maybe fake cartoon type thing or hologram or something like that. Those are not real thing, like us, not real. So I'm walking in the neighborhood, and then suddenly I saw everything is the street is clear, no car in the street, and then no people in outside. So I felt there is something happened, big something happened. So I went to my neighbor house and then relatives house, few of them. And then I felt when I entered the house, I felt there is no older people in there, no parents in there, only children are in the house. So I'm asking the children, are you okay? Are you scared about anything from anything? And then they say, oh, we are okay. in the inside the house we are okay. And then I ask them, do you have foods in home? And they say, yeah. And then I ask them, can you cook your food and stay in home and prepare your food? And they say, yes. So I went few houses. So all houses, there is only children, no older people in there. So when I coming out from the one house and walking in the pathway in the neighborhood, so I'm not walking really in the footpath. I'm walking side of the footpath and inside the grass. I don't want to show up myself in the street. I don't know. There is some confusion with me. And then suddenly I saw from the footpath to main street, closer main street, there is a rally. Those are cartoons really, like some kinds of holiday, or sometimes we do the cartoon rally, right? Big. So those kinds of rally. And there is a dog, like a balloon, like a 7-8 tiers building level, very big. Those, and another cartoon character, Mickey Mouse, and other character, they are railing in the street. And then one of the big bus, there is a lady laying, cartoon lady laying in the car, and she is like a 7-8 story building, like tall. So when she saw me, suddenly she's screaming like her lungs coming out from her body. She is throwing her feet and hand and screaming, oh, there is one. She is showing me and screaming. It's like a mic. In the mic, if you scream like those kinds of loudness. So I'm really nervous that time. I felt very nervous, and then I felt, oh my gosh, she's screaming like alone, screaming like that. And if join a few of them more join with her, like 6, 7, or 7, 8, it's gonna be big disaster. Everybody will be uh, very scared, very scary thing. So my emotion was that time I felt very angry, and then very laughable way she is throwing her feet and hand and screaming, and then very sad too, and all kinds of emotion together, like 3, 4 emotion all together. Like it's like I'm thinking, how dare you? You came from the sky, you are fake, you are screaming at me in my street, in my home. How dare you? Those kinds of feeling inside me. And I'm scared too about their screaming. And then and laughable too. Everything together is the situation is like that. If a stranger came to your house and inside your house came in and asking, who are you, or screaming at you, like those kinds of situation. After that, I woke up, but I don't know what did I saw. It is, I know there is a meaning to it, but I don't really explain what kinds of stuff is happening. After that, I'm really sad. Today, really sad. I told my story to Bengali teaching too.
So now you don't go to sleep after the Knowledge Seekers workshop anymore. I think you're in the same time zone. Where are you in Georgia?
Yes.
What time is it there now? 4:40? 5:40.
Yeah. 4:40.
Yeah, right. So I think for us, it's getting up early in the morning, and I do go to sleep sometimes after the workshop as well. I think this last one was 4 hours, so that was 3 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Yeah.
For us on this side of the
But
wall.
my conclusion is that I think there would be another fake something in front of us. Maybe. I hope not,
I don't know.
but
Sometimes dreams can be very, in a way, confusing, but it sounds like your soul took your soul of physicality with it to see something.
yeah. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And this is the true interactions, apparently. And it's more the reality than the dream. So again, our soul is showing us things, but we don't quite understand it all. But I know, at least my experience when I felt that, in the way where you're conscious of it, it's pretty much fully rememberable, if there's such a word. And it's all instantaneous. So you can clearly remember it. And as I said, there was no traveling between movies, let's say, or between experiences. It was just, you were here. Now, as fast as you change a channel or faster on a television with a remote, you just press it in and boom, you're on a different. And this is the way I experienced it. 3 different scenes fully. Remember, you're able to remember it and you're able to interact in it.
Yes, I can go different dimensions. Yeah. I think so. We are capable. Everybody is capable.
Oh, sure. We're probably capable of creating the soul without the without interacting physically to do that. And there's probably a few caveats, but we have that capability. As we learn with the dream, they told us it was the dream and we believed it. And we probably believe that there's only one way to create a being, and that's through interacting in the physicality. But now we're learning the energy way of creating not only beings, materials, and interactions with others. So we're learning a whole new, as he said, we're experts in the matter state, but we have a lot to learn in the energy state.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to ask, Liliana, are you with us? She may not be. I know she has a lot of other obligations, but okay, we'll take care of that later. It's just some little file we're going to create for her group, so she doesn't have to actually read the disclaimer, but we'll make a little file for that for her. I was just going to ask her to share something. No problem.
Mark, I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for allowing me to present today. And I hope the information conveyed is useful. It's all part of the process of understanding the new capabilities of the plasma science. So the rewarding thing for me, or gratifying thing, let's put it that way, is that finally we have something that is man-made that is of a significant contribution. And then when I say contribution, I'm not saying to what? Contribution to EARTHSPACE, contribution to the community, the intergalactic community.
What do you mean, Alex? Now we have something man-made?
Yeah, exactly.
You're talking the universal units.
Well, the universal units, the universal enhancement units, but we have the vertical, the horizontal,
Oh, sure.
the visual, but we also have the spaceships. And these spaceships, you know, have opportunities to travel within the planet. So let's say for instance, from North America to Europe. But then we also have the capability of interplanetary travel as we're booking flights already to the moon and to Mars. But that is just the beginning. And the thing is that this is done on a man-made basis. And if that is a significant point, and mustn't be forgotten, because what it does is it inures the capability of man to be able to be able to enact in such a way that it contributes to the universal community, as opposed to looking at the tiny perfect Earth space that we have. So this transcends all the various dimensions. This has been beyond my own, you know, personal goals, because as with all goals, you know, there has to be an awareness. And so this is a totally different league. This is a higher league, a higher energy state. And we are now entering into that higher energy state, and we really need to step up our skills and our capabilities. But it isn't a matter of stepping up as you step up a ladder. This isn't the stairway to heaven. This is an awareness and an interpretation of that knowledge, and then utilizing it. And utilizing it in such a manner that is graceful. That is graceful. So that our dominant aspect has to be graceful. You don't dominate with a sledgehammer. And that's the difference. And so this is a really tough lesson for us to learn, but we will learn it, because peace and prosperity is everyone's goal. And if it's not your goal, then you're simply disconnected from your soul, and that too will change. So thank you very much, everybody, for making the North American team meeting here such a powerful event. And thanks, Mark, for your continued work. I'm just going to withdraw into the background.
Well, I don't think all the questions, I think there might be more questions for you. I mean, would you get into a flight system that was made by beings, let's say, from planet Zorg? Or would you be a little bit apprehensive about that? This is what Mr. Kesh had said earlier on, that this is made by man for man. And I think we'll be a little less apprehensive about interacting with these systems because we've created them, not someone from another galaxy or another part of our universe who we aren't even familiar with. You may say, what's going to happen to me? Maybe I'll never come back, or I'll be a prisoner, as Mr. Kesh said, what we do to the lions and the plants from Brazil or Africa, and we put them, but they're very sad because they've been taken out of their structure, sort of, or the environment that they're conditioned to be in. He asked that about the universal community too. Would we put them in some sort of field cage so everybody could look at them like they were some sort of specimen we captured, and for people to maybe gawk at?
Well, Mark, United States did that in Area 51.
Sure.
With the ETs they had there.
We've heard these stories, yes. But some of them managed to escape, and I can't believe that we have the knowledge to hold them. Even Mr. Kesh said that if you don't like the map condition that you're in, you can change it. Or if they put you in jail, you can move out of that jail. So I would think the universal community has that knowledge as well.
All
So
depends
this
what
is
level they have. Yeah.
Sure.
exactly, John. This is we just assume that they have a higher level. So the thing is that we have already seen that we have excitable visitors. So they are intrigued by the prospect and you know the possibility of visiting us here. Maybe they haven't had the capability, but they've had the desire. But so then they see that it's a welcoming, you know, it's a benevolence, it's a friendly and a safe, you know, excursion, and so they want to come here, and the reason they're excitable is because for them it's like an amusement park ride, you know,
Yeah, well, you
and
had the Greys that had the treaty with Eisenhower in 1954.
well, I don't think the Greys were anything more than just surrogates.
Yeah,
The
they were
Greys,
from Orion.
You mean like front negotiators, perhaps? We'll send in
No,
the
the treaty had an exchange of different
Mhm.
powers, let's put it this way, not to
Mhm.
mention the details.
well, the Greys, as I understand it, were just simply the soldiers, the foot soldiers.
But the Greys are from Orion, and the good ones are from the Pleiades. They're
So
two
that's a matter
different
of opinion.
civilizations. Yeah,
Right.
well,
And again, we've heard of many of the, as Mr. Ketch said, a lot of this is concocted in a way. He's taught us differently about space, that it is a peaceful place, that there is no war, and if people have that intention of harming another, then they're dispatched with or put in maybe some sort of Facebook jail or something for a while till they learn more. But yes, there's been so many stories and they're pretty well written and actually documented. I know the story you're talking about, and they made all the people on the base there go into the lunchroom and close all the curtains so no one could see. And apparently the president was supposed to be at the dentist at the time. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So yes, we've heard this story before, and I'm sure, as Mr. Ketch said, we've always been part of the universal community. Imagine being told about one of the most beautiful places in the universe, but yet, as beautiful as it is, it's also could be very dangerous for you to go there, because we may want to capture or shoot at you or do some other things. As Mr. Ketch said, if you see a bunch of lions fighting each other, you certainly aren't going to walk up to them and say, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question?" So this is the way the universal community is looking at us. We're pretty, as Alex says many times, we're kind of a bunch of wild, I don't think you say something.
Hooligans.
Hooligans, there you go.
Yes. But you know, we have to recognize artificial intelligence. And because the artificial intelligence doesn't necessarily only have to be man-made, you know, it can be artificial intelligence is artificial, and it is of the lowest energy state. It is also of the lowest intelligence. That's why it's artificial. Cannot possibly compete with universal intelligence. And so, you know, just as we are observers of the three dimensions, the makers of the artificial intelligence have the intelligence. You cannot convey that intelligence to the artificial construct in the physical reality because it's already right out of the gate. It's of a lower energy state. And so this becomes a perpetuated fallacy of man-made thought, and then our thought is constructed in such a way. So this realization that we now have a man-made capability that has proof of concept and has a universal welcoming, so much so that not only I have all the people who have gone into outer space with their units have gone safely and arrived back safely. But as I say, we also have visitors who are now entertaining the possibility of coming here. And if they're actually using our system to come here, that means that they haven't had the capability of doing that, regardless of whether or not what dimension that they are in. So the point being is that the reality dimension is whatever energy state that you're involved with, and then the manifestation of that physicality is determined by the environment. And that's the message that I wanted to convey today, is that we have to take this into account, and we can't ignore it, and we cannot decide and pick and choose what we're going to take into account. We do have to make a decision at some point and say, well, you know, if we continue taking things into account, we're never going to get there. And so this becomes the balance point, the Maggrav condition, where we have the balance point. We're having everything that we need to do the travel, and then do the travel and fulfill that intention. So, you know, it isn't your intention to keep fulfilling intentions. The intention is to do something, fulfill that intention, and then from there create more. And so this is where there's always a benefit. And this is something that we have to take into consideration in our life. If we have doubt, ask yourself the basic question: where's the benefit? Who benefits? Who benefits? And when you find that your hardship is at your expense, and that someone else benefits because of your hardship, then you find that that person is in a self-consuming place. And then it becomes your duty to create a barrier to prevent that from happening. And so all of us have been naive in such a great way. And the reason for that is because we have the confidence we have the confidence in life. So I'm on that basis.
Sean, I just muted you. Okay. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
I just want to emphasize that that is a positive point, that, you know, we are working towards the benefit of life. You know, and this is, it's not a noble cause. It is the cause. If you're not doing that, then you're disconnected from your own soul, and that becomes the greatest sin. So as we all connect and engage and understand what our soul is trying to tell us, and understand that our soul is our best friend, and everything that we create from that is part of us, but it is not us. Our soul is us. And so this is where what we create is determined from our soul and the soul's intention. And then from there, it interacts with the other fields. And so understanding that lesson puts us on the road to peace and prosperity.
And of course,
Can I
we, oh, go ahead. I'm going to step away 1 minute, be right back. Please carry on, Selena and Alex.
Yeah. Can I share another story? It's not a story, it's a real story. It was my little one, when he's born, he's now 16. So my mother and father used to live in New Jersey. So they came and then live with us few months, and then after they gone. So when they were here, that time my husband bought for me one laptop. First time. We had desktop, but for me the gift is laptop. So in the laptop I was looking this thing, that thing, and then suddenly I found the gray picture, the uh, the gray alien, those kinds of stuff. So I'm looking at those. So my mother was there, and then she suddenly saw I'm looking those things, and she told me she scared and told me, "Oh my God, who put the ghost picture in there?" So, then I told my mother, "This one ghost?" And she said, "Yes, I saw those kinds of ghosts in Bangladesh." That means it was before than that, when they came here, before that. And she told me um, when she was in Bangladesh, that time, the Bangladeshi people, they wash clothes and then they dry in the roof of their building, or sometimes backyard. They don't use dryer. Most of people, they don't use dryer. So our clothes, those dry in the rooftop. So the maid, she forgot to bring the clothes. So she part-time maid. She went her home, so she didn't brought the cloth from the roof. So after like 11, 12 o'clock in the nighttime, suddenly my parents sleep very late, because we live in Dhaka, in the city, bigger city. People wake like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., like that. So my mother suddenly remember, oh, the cloth was in the roof. So she sent my little sister to bring the cloth from the roof. So she went to the roof to brought the cloth. And then she ran. She saw something near our nearest building. There is something she saw, and then she cried and ran home. And she's saying, "Oh, mommy, something in the other roof, the neighbor's roof, something is sitting there." So my parents say, "Nothing. There should be nothing. You see something. Maybe it's a mistake or something." So my mother and father both, and her, went to the roof again to see what kinds of stuff she saw. And then my mother told me they saw those gray sitting on the railing, the roof railing, and it is foggy, but the gray is thinking they are not seeing him, but they're seeing the gray. So they thought that one is ghost. So my mother told my father, or should I throw some, what is that, some kinds of mud or a stick or something to go away? And my father said, no, don't disturb him. Just come down. So everybody came down. So
Well, as Mr. Kesh said, a third of the people on this planet are not from here. They're just hiding in the matter state. And when he says people,
yeah,
that includes the vertical people as well as the horizontal people, I believe. So they're
yeah,
already here among us, but they're just hiding. They're too shy to reveal themselves, of fear of being perhaps eaten by us. So they're already here in a phenomenal numbers, as I understand it, even though they're hiding. We see the tree, or we see the bush, we see the flower, but we don't realize perhaps that could be a being from space just enjoying some of the physicality for a time.
just think, a lot of people say they saw ghosts. That means sometimes they saw those kinds of stuff and think they're seeing ghosts, right? It's funny.
Yes, I think more and more of this will be clear, but of course, traveling in the matter state can be, as Mr. Kesh said, you have a lot of system failure and you have a lot of loss of life. So it's not the preferable way to travel in space, even though this is the way apparently many of them do travel in the UFOs. But he did say it was quite dangerous. We would have a lot of loss of life if we went that way because of system failures. So now we're learning the preferred way, or the way the, let's say, the creator moves in the universe, which is much safer. And you always seem to return. Anyone else want to bring something else up before we end the meeting? Thank you very much, Alex, and all those who have participated today.
I think it's just a matter of perspective, Mark. You take someone, when I was younger, I went and worked on the oil rigs, and I met this Russian chap, and it was 40 below that day. He said, "Oh, what a beautiful day." And I looked at him. I said, "What do you mean a beautiful day?" He says, "I'm from Siberia. In the wintertime, it's minus 70 all the time. This is very warm." So it's a matter of perspective. He was used to the cold weather. He came to Canada to work because it was warmer to work. So it's a matter of perspective. I think it's the same thing with the Universal Council. It is a matter of perspective of what dimension they're seeing. Do they know dimensions the same as we do? Do they eyes see the same as we do? Do they smell the same as we do? We don't know this. I think that's why Mr. Kesh has invited the Universal Council here, so we can interact and share.
Community, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
Community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no question. There's going to be a lot of interchange of knowledge. You may even go to other places for a period of time and bring back certain knowledges that are going to be shared here on the planet. And as he said, I think it was the last workshop, where man's knowledge isn't even a speck of dust compared to the knowledge of the universe. So I think we've got a ways to go, but it'll be a beautiful journey, a beautiful trip, as we keep elevating and learning more knowledge, more serving. Again, all this, the whole creation, he said in the last workshop, the whole purpose of the creation is servitude, nothing else, no matter which way you look at it. So that's why part of the ethos of the foundation, or the main tenet, is we are here to serve and not to be served. We all know that. But it takes some getting used to. Over time, I think we'll get more and more used to it. And again, you know, here on the planet, the stronger eats the weaker. In space, the stronger feeds the weaker. And you never have another superior being sort of rule over an inferior being, at least in space. This is my understanding. It's against the rules to do that. And apparently everyone knows when somebody breaks the rules in space. Anyone have anything else? Randy, you talked about some bottles. I didn't read the story you put, or was it a testimonial? Would you like to share anything about that?
What I did was I reorganized my kitchen and made it into my GANs lab.
Nice.
So one whole entire counter is filled with nothing but gallons of GANs ready for. It's funny, I put some advertisements out for plasma water and $1 a liter, you pick it up. No one came. So I started giving it away. And one lady came and said, "I have some big glass jugs I don't use anymore. I'll make you a deal. you supply me with plasma water, I'll give you a whole bunch of glass jugs. So here comes 423, 6-gallon glass jugs. And matter of fact, she just pulled up into the driveway and I give her plasma water. That's the trade. So no monetary trade, but the trail of the fact that I'm giving to her soul and she's giving to mine to help
Beautiful.
the community.
Yeah. What is she doing with this? Is she taking a lot of plasma water just for herself, or she has a farm?
She's a farmer and she feeds it to her plants and to her animals. And everyone that comes to the house, whether they know it or not, she says they're getting plasma water. So it's interesting to see that people are aware, and they are becoming more aware of the energies. She
Right.
said, another friend of mine who's a plumber, and he helped me set a bunch of different things up, and he got the glass jugs, and he said, I don't know what's in that water, but I went to my dentist, and my dentist said there's nothing wrong with your teeth anymore. So it's doing something. It's changing the physicality. It's changing the physicality. Because after all, like we say, we are the plasma units. We are the units ourselves. And like Mr. Kesh said, all our ganses are hooking back up to the units and links. And anytime I made my GANs, my intention was hook the fields of this GANs up to all the GANSes on the planet just for peace. And this morning, when I went up earlier to get my second cup of coffee, there was a woodpecker on the railing where I put all the ganses outside. And the landlord, she was up there and she said, that woodpecker never comes out of the forest. It's always in the forest. So the animals are attracted to the GANS energy for sure. So that woodpecker was, and the moment I turned around to get the camera, he was gone.
A shy one, let's say.
Yeah, a shy one.
So if it's connecting to ganses, don't we have 8 billion bags of ganses walking around this planet? Just in the human form, not even considering the plants and the animals, or the verticals and the horizontals. And this is what he said: if you have a jar of GANs in your kitchen, the system is connected to it, or we're connected to it, or it's connected to Linz. So make those Ganses and set them up as Randy has.
Yeah, there's ganses in every window in this house. All around the railing of the house, all the way down the fence line. And then when we put the poles up in the wintertime so that the man knows when to plow the road, each one of those plastic stands, a tube of GANs around it.
I remember what you had showed us last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nicely. Lisbeth.
Hello. Randy is correct. All animals accepted and find the plasma water outside the garden. I put the 2 containers with the plasma water for many animals around it. But around, I don't know, 1 month ago, it surprised me when they take my bottle with the water and drinking. In that moment, one, no sé cómo se dice, Alenka, ¿me puedes ayudar? ¿O John? One animal, libélula, but no sé what the name in English.
Y aquí estoy.
Hola, mira que hace como un mes puse mi botella de agua de plasma, estaba sentada en la playa y de inmediato se posó una pequeña libélula, yo creo que era recién nacida. Estuvo varios minutos ahí al pie de mi boca, puesta en la misma salida. Y yo dije, viniste a tomar agua, y me quedé ahí inmóvil porque jamás había visto una pequeñita y al pie mío.
lo que no me acuerdo de cómo se traduce. It's
Yeah,
not a
libélula.
horsefly, but those that have big transparent wings.
A dragonfly, maybe.
Exactly, that's it.
Yes, but little. Pero pegada de mi boca porque imagínate una botellita que ancho tiene una salida. Y yo me quedé inmóvil. Todos los animalitos buscan el agua, definitivamente.
Sí, yo también puedo, I can vouch for all this also. The way the animals get near me, because I've got, well, I've been having this dome of energy around my home for 8 years now. And the way the birds and the cats and even the cockroaches, they walk around, they're not afraid. It's incredible.
It is. I had put a small bowl out for the cats outside or the other animals that come by. And no sooner did I get in the house and I look out the window and there's a bird in the cat's bowl. And he's just splashing. And I'm like, I just filled the bowl up. What are you doing? He's taking a bird bath in the plasma water. But that didn't even take, this happened twice now, where almost as soon as I poured it, went back into the house, I look out the window and there's the bird taking a bird bath in it, really like luxuriously. And of course, there are cats in the area, so he's on the ground doing that. And I said, wow, something is attracting that bird. And of course, it was a hot
and they're
part
not
of the,
aggressive to each other either.
yeah. Yeah, I try to put some zinc in there to give them a little balance and things, but it was a hot part of the summer, so maybe they weren't able to find it. But I thought that was very unusual. This is the first year I've ever seen that. Maybe it's happened, but I just haven't noticed it. But they were just, and the bird was just like, it didn't come out. I said, okay, flap your wings a few times and then you're going to fly away. It must have stayed there for 30 or 40 or 1 minute at the time, just sort of splashing and getting itself all wet with the combination of plasma waters I put out.
Yes, they use the plasma water, it changes the ecosystem, no? Or the around the world, I think.
Of course.
This
yeah.
is the balance, no? Yeah.
Yes, the GANS knows what to do and where to go and how to balance things. That's one of its specialties, I think, is balancing.
Yes. For that reason, it's very important always days when you walk, or obviously not a new job, maybe, but a new work, but at the street or whatever it is, the drivers or whatever, put all the time spray the plasma water, because one day, change it.
Yes, I'm thinking that, I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I'm just thinking that the GANs at nighttime that we've all sprayed for all this time is going to have an illumination to it. I don't know why I've been thinking that it will have a very soft glow somehow when I don't know exactly, but when the systems come together, maybe it won't, it's just my imagination, but I was just thinking as they add more fields and sort of excite the GANs, it's going to appear as a soft glow. I don't know why, but and I could be totally wrong about this. And you'll sort of be able to see where it is. Maybe that's just my dreaming. But we know for sure it is a connection to the system. And that's the wellness centers Mr. Keshet pointed out to us. That's one of the reasons I understand. We're making links to the wellness centers. We're making links to LINTs. So continue to spray the plasma water, release the waters, and so on and so forth. And that's something that our physicality can continue to do. And then, of course, the next step is using the fields of our soul. Using the matter state, we use the matter state, he said, to reach the level of understanding of the soul of the man.
Yes, always days is a big opportunity for change the world, for change the humanity, for change the space.
Yeah, we're going to bring that change. The satellites, this system, the wishes of all of us will bring that change on the energy level. And it's going to affect everything, the smallest bugs, the largest trees, all of it is becoming continuously elevated. And the human beings, he said, there's a continual process of elevation going on.